Welcome back to the Stronghold Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Barton. Today in episode 6, Marathon, we are going to discuss the marathon I recently completed and many lessons learned about capability and truth. The idea for the modern marathon was inspired by the legend of an ancient Greek messenger who raced from the site of Marathon to Athens, a distance of about 40 kilometers or nearly 25 miles, with the news of an important Greek victory over an invading army of Persians in 490 BC. After making his announcement, the exhausted messenger collapsed and died. Having now completed a marathon, that legend is very relatable. But before I jump into race day, there's a little backstory to share. Pre-2019, I didn't run. Distance running for me was sprints measured in tens of yards. There are 1,760 yards in a mile. Are you kidding me? There are 46,112 yards in a marathon. Pre-2019, I never, ever entertained the thought of running a marathon. Ever. I made fun of runners for looking goofy as I drove by or they passed my house. So what changed? In 2018 into 2019, I walked every single day. Every single day, rain or shine. Why? Well, I've covered it in prior podcasts, but as a man, husband, father, and friend, I was all words, no action. The impact of that realization drove me to seek out help, voices who had turned things around, and a better relationship with food. I tried keto and paleo diets, and it was in that community I heard about Mark Sisson and subscribed to his daily Apple newsletter. In that community, getting outside and walking is highly touted. And for me, I thought, I could do that. Was it at this point a marathon came into mind? No. But at some point between 2018 and 2019, while I walked every day, the thought of running a little bit became something possible. So starting with something as routine as walking, being intentional with it every day grew into running. Was it at this point a marathon came into mind? No. The bits and pieces of running, they slowly grew into runs. Actual consecutive mile runs. Now we're talking about 2 to 3 mile runs here. But this put together a new thought in my mind. The triathlon my son completed in 2018 that provided the life-changing realization of me being all words, no action. Maybe I could do a triathlon a year later. And you know what? I did. Almost a year to the day of knowing something had to change, I completed a triathlon in June 2019. How did it go? Short story, not majestic. The swim was more a controlled drowning. The bike was full of mechanical breakdowns. And the run, 10-minute, 22-second miles. 4 years later, I would run sub 8-minute miles in the same race. But you know what? You know what I learned? I could do a triathlon. And that the criticism of that day, that was all in my competitive mind. People were cheering me on like I was an athlete again. And I liked it. No, I loved it. So it must have been at this point that a marathon came into mind. No. The summer of 2020 and the rest of that year was a lost year for almost all of the world. Community, group exercise, race days, and more was discouraged and deemed dangerous by the health officials that we didn't elect, and until then, largely didn't know existed. One thing I will say is I'm grateful for COVID for many reasons. The reason relevant to this podcast is that during COVID, I largely saw two distinct groups of people. Those who prior to COVID years weren't doing well or were coasting, as I had been. During COVID, many of them got worse. They fell off a cliff of both mental and physical health. Many are lost, and more are no longer with us. Then there was another group, a group that I latched onto early. Some of us were coasting, and others were excelling. An outside force threatened us, threatened our freedom, shed light on true health, and we responded. We sought personal excellence, and we leveled up. The force moved us closer together, put us on each other's radars, and created a lasting bond. Many of those that I came across and got to know are now the most important relationships in my life. But back to marathon and the story. In 2023, it was finally deemed safe to gather again by the powers that be. All that determination, resolve, and intentionality from the group and community forge created a massive head of steam. It was at this point, early in 2023, that a marathon came into mind. Driven by seeing one of my sons crush a triathlon in early June, this was going to be the breakout. The plan was as follows: a spring filled with both high mileage runs and biking, resulting in a triathlon in early August, a 100-mile bike ride at the end of August, and a marathon at the beginning of October. It was ambitious, I know, but with my oldest son graduated from college and youngest from high school, they didn't need dad around as much, right? And certainly my wife didn't care, right? Well, in future podcasts, we'll kind of explore the misconceptions there and the way that I could better approach things. But long story short is the triathlon went amazing. I survived the swim, I smoked the field in the bike, and the run was very solid. The 100-mile bike ride was a success. If I have one natural ability, it is biking. It was the beginning of September to the August 1st marathon, the wheels started coming off. I had, at the least, overtrained. Found out my body had something called IT bands, and I almost tore my ACL because I didn't know that my body had IT bands. But I wasn't going to stop. The pain was temporary, right? Well, all that preparation in that month resulted in the marathon actually being canceled due to heat in the first week of Minnesota. My body was broken and in need of serious rehab, just shy of surgery. It was at this point a lot of thoughts ran through my head. Quit. This isn't good for you. You aren't a runner, Dave. This training takes too much time. You don't even like dropping muscle and weight to become faster. Nobody would care if you tapped out. But you know what I realized? You know what was burning in my heart? I would care. I would notice. Those hundreds of miles running in 2023, those miles of walking over the years leading up, my body through injury telling me to give in, it all ignited a fire in me. I would not quit. I would not go back to words. I would be all about that action, and I would complete a marathon. Completion of the marathon would clearly define my capability in the form of a finish time on race day. Here are some of the key learnings from training. 1. The challenge was large, and the truth of how I prepared was going to be put to the fire. But my actions had the power to impact that truth that would be revealed. 2. When you are beat up in the midst of high mileage weeks or had a bad training run, that is not the time to assess. It is the time to trust in yourself. Maybe check the plan, but stick to it. I reached out to congratulate a buddy who smashed his marathon 2 weeks prior to mine. He asked, "How's the training going?" This just happened to be the day after I completed my longest training run. I was beat up, and now wasn't the time to think about this. But I answered, "Not great." And here's where the third lesson or learning from training came in. In the final 2 weeks of training, I stepped down weekly mileage or tapered. Every day that I gave my body to heal, that I gave it space from the beating, my mind recovered. I started to see all those runs, all those workouts, all the foods provide some promise and optimism about race day. My pace came down, and my lungs and cardio were strong. The learnings from race day. First, the training had paid off. While my body took a beating, I never thought about my lungs the entire run. 2, when you have some gas, apply a little. You never know when you're going to be running on empty. I said apply a little. Around the 20-mile mark, we hit about a 300-foot descent. My mind said, go, use it, use the downhill. My body would react a few miles later with another opinion. Third lesson. For 3 hours and 54 minutes, I now know I can push myself. I can be intentional with every single stride, and I have more in me than I ever imagined. The learnings after the race. 1. Know the course ahead of time by taking time to research. This might sound familiar if you had talked to me after my half marathon back in June. While I still didn't fully learn this lesson, I was a little bit better. I knew where my climbs in a sense were. 2. Gains in life are not all measured by physical markers. Because I tell you what, this pursuit of running was not in many regards, quote, good for me physically. However, by taking on this physical challenge, managing injuries, and seeing that culminate into 3+ hours of intentionally pushing my limits, gave to me enormous amounts of mental and spiritual gains. The final learning. When you tackle something big, it gives you perspective. If it isn't 3+ hours of struggle now, it really doesn't worry me. Go jump in a 40-degree lake, Dave? No problem. Triathlons, Dave? Let's go. My friend Eli asked me after, do you think this was a bigger physical accomplishment or mental accomplishment? I quickly replied, both. I challenge you all to find something. Some dragon to slay in your life. Something that both excites you and scares you at the same time. Find it and tackle it. This does not have to be a marathon. This could be walking every day for a year. Cleaning out all the junk food in your home. Being the spouse or parent you want to be. Get a plan. Write it down. Find others to pull in and hold you accountable. If it is big enough, it should scare you a bit. You will likely have setbacks, and you will want to quit. Just don't. Don't quit. See it through. Take it day by day. Check off those boxes in your plan. I promise it will be worth it. Not easy. Find your marathon. Thank you for joining me and listening into the Stronghold Podcast.